Orwa Ajjoub, welcome back to Kalam Podcast, a friend of the show, I'm proud to say. You're an analyst living in Malmö, born and raised in Damascus, Syria. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today on Kalam Podcast.
Thank you for inviting me, Edgar. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
So, Arwa, today we're talking about Syria in not as sort of a hopeful way, maybe. Last time we spoke, the Assad regime had sort of just fallen, and there was a lot of sort of positivity around notions of national unity, and maybe this could be like something that we can push for together, like a positive sort of development in the region. Still, there still might be, a chance for that. But as of today, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, based in the UK, almost 1,000 civilians have been killed in what they actually are calling a genocide on the Syrian coastline. To me, it looks something like a pogrom against specifically Alawi Syrians in these kind of revenge killings. 1,000 almost civilians in just a few days is really a staggering figure.
Mm.
Could you shed some light on exactly what's going on? How did this start, and why is it happening?
Yeah, sure. I mean, let me start first with numbers because I think they matters and they are also tricky. Um, uh, I think we need to be very cautious with numbers, whether wherever it comes from, because it's too literally it's too early to tell about the number of those who have been killed or about the number of fighters actually that were involved in the process. Additionally, I would say in particular, I would take the Syrian Observatory with a grain of salt. Like I take their numbers a little bit with more cautious than other platforms. During the Syrian conflict, it has proven that it was not the most trustworthy network where you can get your news from. So this is the first thing. The second thing, I mean, if I want to just maybe reconstruct what happened, basically they were like remnant of Assad's regime in the coastal areas. It has been always source of instability for the last month, maybe. The security forces, the state or the government sent security forces to tackle the instability there, and they were ambushed. I think they killed between 13 to 15. We don't know exactly which number to take, but between 13 to 15 security forces. They are young people who were recruited lately. And this is something also we can talk about later, but basically, the government recruited hundreds or thousands of people to the security forces who have limited experience, who went through 20 days training course, which was definitely not enough, something that the government has been criticized for. But anyway, they were ambushed, and then the government sent reinforcement to these areas to deal with the violence, and then they were surprised by the amount of Assad regime remnant who were, I would say, armed, equipped. They announced immediately the establishment of three different councils, like the Coast, there is Syrian Resistance, and a third one. And when this happened, when the 13 to 15 personnel were killed from the security forces, there was public mobilizations taking place in mosques, in public squares, in a lot of areas, if not in all the areas that are under the state control. Which I mean, I would say definitely, like we're talking about Idlib, we're talking about Aleppo, we're talking about areas that have experienced the killing and the torture and the worst thing you could ever think of by the Syrian regime. So these people got the news, and then, as I said, the mobilization took place, and then you have thousands of people who joined forces, very uncontrolled, very chaotic, lack disciplines. They are not in their groups. In addition to some of the SNA factions, Syrian National Army factions, who were sent also by the new government because, in theory, they dissolved themselves and they are part of the new government, or at least the majority of them. So, in theory, the state sent reinforcement from the state, but in reality, the state sent reinforcement from uncontrolled factions.
Yeah.
In addition yeah, exactly. So this is one. And then in addition to leaving the space open for religious figures who were inciting and fueling sectarian violence. This is what happened. Thousands of people went to the coast, and then some of them went inside and carried out these massacres, extrajudiciary killing, humiliation, everything you could think of. I think there was also another very concerning, I would say alarming development, which was a video showing two soldiers throwing what appeared to be small barrel bombs or bombs, dump bombs, into Jeble. It was over the sea, close to the sea. We don't know. I think what matters here is the idea itself that someone is redoing what Assad did to Syrians and what Israel did to Gaza, right? Like throwing dump bombs over populated areas or like overpopulation. So this is what we had until then, and then this is where HTS or the government sent security forces to kind of deal with not only the Assad regime remnant, but also with the uncontrolled factions. And I mean, you know what happened rest and after that. But today, right now, we have I don't have number as I said, but we're talking about hundreds. I don't know the number, hundreds of civilians, including few women and children. We cannot confirm this, but there are women. And also, we have like hundreds of the security forces who were also killed while defending from the remnant of the former regime. And I think it should be noted that the security forces played major role in preventing angry, grieving civilians, Sunni civilians, to go into Alawite areas. So they did their best to protect these areas from not only armed factions, but also from angry and grieving civilians who wanted to take justice by their own hands.
Okay, so to summarize, basically there was a an ambush by pro-Assad remnants of Assad's army against unexperienced new recruits from the government forces from HTS, the new Syrian regime led by Ahmed al-Shara. And in response to this, there was a general mobilization, not just from government forces, but from all kinds of factions of Syrian society, I guess mainly from Islamist Sunni militias or former Sunni militias, and they made their way to the coast and uh, beat back the remnants of the Assad forces, but in the process committed massacres against hundreds of civilians, including women and possibly children. And is your numbers are hard. I understand that, but is your view that most of the civilians killed are Alawites?
I think overwhelming majority
Yeah,
are Alawites. And I would add just to it's not only armed factions who were mobilized, but also civilians who have lost their dear people during the war, who have been tortured, some of them by Assad. So there was a lot of revenge, not only, revenge, of course, based on sectarian line of division, but it's not only factions. That's what I'm trying to say.
yeah, yeah. Sure. No, I can imagine that. It seems. I mean, this is the worst nightmare for people living on in the coastal areas of Syria, and a lot of people have been warning of this specific development, that with Assad gone, the protection for minorities is also gone. A lot of people who supported Assad and who maybe have the kind of anti-imperialist position in the Syrian conflict have been saying "I told you so" the past few
Mm,
days.
mm.
What? How do you respond to? I'm sure that you've also been met by these kind of comments. How do you respond to that?
I mean, social media has been really painful for many people, including me, these days, because, as you said, there are a lot of Assad's loyalists, and it strikes me a lot because, like, most of these people live outside. So it seems that they don't even share the majority of Alawite sentiment that he left them. So for them, they still think of him as the leader, the way they talk about him, which is really like strange. So I told you so. I mean, it's like when they said, like, I saw some of them on Twitter, and they were like, "I told you so, Syria. I told you so. You want jihadists, you want Al Qaeda too. This is what Al Qaeda, this is what jihadists do, and you will really cry for the days of Assad." But I would argue uh, what we are in today is basically because of Assad. If I want to look at, if I want to give a historical look at what has happened, I don't see it that's something that was created 2 days ago. I think it was the Assad's father and then the Assad's son, and this is where we ended up. Um, I mean, I'm not sure how far we can go with history, but the whole Syria state was built on this kind of. You had Yassin al-Hajj Saleh before, and Yassin talks about الطائفة الأسدية, the Assadist, right? And I think that's what Hafez did, right? That's something that he relied on the Assadists, who are like from different sects, but they are loyal to him. But also, he abused his relationship to his sect by giving them this superficial power, right? But at the same time, keeping them uneducated, keeping them underdeveloped, keeping their areas like very, like, if you saw Alawites area, they are very poor. But at the same time, there was some symbolic power that Alawites enjoyed through the years, right? So this kind of tension between those in power and those are not in power has been there since Assad, the father. And then when he died, his son came, and maybe he was trying to be more liberal, I would say, and more opening towards others. Yeah, that's fine. But when the uprising started, when the revolution started, this is where everything changed. This is where he started to realize, like, I have to rely on these people. This is what Ibn Khaldun called asabiyya, which you rely on those who you think you share the same line, right? Um, and throughout the war, if you see the videos that like of torture, where like Syrian soldiers asking detainees or captured people, name your god or say who is your god, and then the detainee or like the one who's being tortured doesn't know what to say, and then the soldiers say Bashar is your god. So in a way, the former regime created this kind of tension. And this is just manifestation of it. I can talk a lot about the structural aspect of it, but what I'm trying to say is that the moment we are in is literally the consequences of Assad's regime. And then now back to the point, when, to be completely honest with you, when the 8th and on the 8th of December, I, as well as many analysts, we expected that such sectarian violence would take place. It didn't. We were so happy. We rejoiced. We were like, that's amazing. Like, we didn't understand that how all our analysis and lived experience of the sectarian aspect of the regime did not reflect after all this war, right? So that was like, I think, a moment of realization for us that maybe we have got this wrong. And at the same time, we were talking to people, and they were like, "But we will not leave, like, Alawites or those who participate in the Syrian regime. We will not leave them alone." And then I think one of the problematic issues that lead us to this certain point that we see today, that everyone is like those who are telling us, "I told you so," is that basically when HTS moved into Damascus, they treated the justice file as something, we can work on it. It's not a priority. We are in power now. We need to be consolidated first.
Yeah.
We need to get international legitimacy. I mean, guess what? Even if you have like deep-seated grievances against Alawites, against the regime, against whoever. There was this belief, I'm not sure if it was conscious or not, since you have power, it doesn't matter anymore. You can deal with it on a long term, right? It could be structural by time. So that's not basically what happened. What happened is basically there was like this famous phrase that soldiers of HTS told to Syrian army when they moved into Damascus, اذهبوا فأنتم الطلقاء. This sentence means you can go, you are free to go, right? And that was like basically a phrase said by the Prophet when he moved into Al Medina. And so those who were fighting him, he just kind of gave them amnesty, right? So the belief among fighters, filing ranks, that those who have been killing us for years, especially the army, the security forces, now are free. So how does this work? And that's why I think when the ambush happened and the mobilization calls like for jihad or whatever for participating in this, it's kind of like it was they were susceptible to these calls more than any other time because they feel that justice has not started yet. I today I talked with one of the people in Homs who wanted to join the security forces, and then like the state or like HTS or they pushed them back, they forced them not to join. But if you see the discussion was like it's the state's problem, it's not my problem. They want me to shut up and sit and watch them slaughtering my brothers in the security forces. No, I'm not going to do this. So you see, it's justice plays a major role in what's happening right now, and it's really like it's when someone comes to you and say like 7th of October was the problem of Hamas that happened on the 7th of October. The problem is the Palestinians, and you kind of like just gloss over the whole historical context. And I think the same here. Uh, Something I think that many Syrians, I don't know why they are trying to avoid it, but I think we need to confront ourselves. There is sectarianism in Syria. It does exist.
Yeah.
And all these claims that I'm seeing them like, oh, we Syrian, we have lived, we have coexisted for thousands of years. That's not true. Like, that's not true. Like, for example, I saw also like one of Assad's remnants on Twitter saying, in Syria, we were not allowed to ask about each other's sects during the time of Hafiz al-Assad, which is the most ridiculous thing. It's basically because I ask you what's your name, you tell me, I ask you about your name, and then I know where you're from, and then I treat you accordingly. So I just think we are dealing now with the really heavy burden that Assad's regime left for us.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to say about that, especially, I mean, when you hear people like pro-Assad people on Twitter talking about what Syria used to be during Assad, it's a little bit like Iran monarchy royalists or royalist loyalists, sorry, monarchy loyalists
Mm,
talking about, oh, in Tehran University we only went with miniskirts and everyone had a Western way of thinking and everyone had
mm, mm.
so much there was so much money and everyone was wealthy and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's just obviously that's a myth, and I appreciate you saying that there are problems with sectarianism in Syria, and I do appreciate the fact that the Assad regime and the Ba'ath system under Assad definitely manipulated sectarian tensions to their favor and created this dichotomy of like it's either our dictatorship, which is minorities ruling over a majority, or it's going to be Daesh, basically. It's going to be Al Qaeda, it's going to be ISIS. But could you speak a little bit about, I mean, we've spoken now about like the Assad regime manipulation, but clearly there are underlying tensions and a deep-seated hatred from Sunni Muslim extremists against not just Assad and his regime, but clearly against just anyone who is not Sunni Muslim. And I think these killings on the coast is a proof of that, or because you're an expert on the jihadi networks and how they function. Do you think that there is, I mean, without generalizing the entire Syrian population, of course, and the
Mm.
entire Sunni Muslim population, but clearly there is an issue of sectarian hate between Sunni Muslims and other minorities.
Like, yes, I don't disagree in a sense that many Sunnis feel that they have been living in a system that inflicted injustice on them, right? However, how many out of those would go to that extent and say, I want to kill Alawites? That's a different question, right? So, um, uh, for example, areas that have been affected harshly by the Syrian regime atrocities, they are more prone and more susceptible for this kind of tone, right? Additionally, throughout the years, the Syrian uprising has been Islamicized in a way. Like, factions that are like Jabhat al-Nusra, ISIS. Of course, there is a spectrum, right? We're not talking about like one rigid block of extremists. Um, but also it's not particularly like it's not religious because you know what? Guess like when HTS moved to Damascus, when they liberated Damascus, we didn't see like they were very disciplined, like HTS was very disciplined. And we saw some, the Turkestan party or Ansar Tawheed, they burned the tree and then HTS reinstalled it. So HTS was pretty much, they have this sense of Sunni superiority that they want to impose, but it's not like they wanna kill everyone, right? So you have a sectarian tone within HTS, within all the factions fighting alongside them, but it's also personal. It's also societal. It's also, so it's not only religious politics, but also it's political identities, also it's
Sure.
societal identities.
Of course, I totally think so too. I mean, the sense of Sunni superiority for many people that would feel that, I'm sure it's not like textual. You're reading in like the hadiths and the Quran saying that, oh, this is why
Mm,
we're superior. It's a cultural thing. I get it. I get that. But I just I think a lot of people are afraid, even if they're not pro-Assad, they're still, nervous about the prospect of one sectarian superiority being replaced by another one. Instead of Alawite supremacy, you have Sunni supremacy now.
I mean, it's a fair concern. It's a very legit concern. I mean, at the end of the day, Edgar, like Jolani is a product of the context.
Yeah.
So we can't really expect. And this is again, like I really like this idea of being very realist when you think about policy, but very moral when you think about what should be done. So like if I want to assess this realistically, I just don't expect a Jolani. I mean, as I told you before, I promised myself I will be surprised if I am surprised by anything a Jolani does. So I promised myself not to be surprised. But when he moved to Syria, when he moved to Damascus, the radical shift in his discourse, it tells you a lot, right? So he was talking about Sunni entity. He's now talking about Syria for all Syrians. The way he responded the last 2 days, to be honest, he was very responsive. And he took into consideration everything has been said in social media. He spoke to one of the journalists who lost who lost her family. That's again, Edgar. That does not mean he doesn't bear the responsibility for what happened. I'm just saying that I think like it's interesting today to see is that Al-Shara and the controlled element of his group, right? They are really trying to stabilize Syria. They are trying to do whatever it takes to rule. They want to have international recognition, and this is something that they are going above and beyond to achieve it, right? But again, there are like unaddressed grievances, right? This is not, of course, in any shape or form to justify the massacres. the massacres were horrible. The massacres were like the worst thing that could happen to Syria for a long time now. They are similar to the massacres that happened, the Ghouta massacre, for example, the chemical attack. I just don't see the difference between Al Ghouta attacks and this attacks. All of them are horrible, all of them in the same spectrum.
Yeah.
Um, and and of course, many Alawites have the right to be afraid, especially by what happened a couple of days ago, right? And the Alawites community and locals are not to be blamed. And I'm against all these ideas that, oh, Alawites knew about that this is going to happen. This is the plan of the remnant. No, how do you know? And then what authority they have on them to tell them that we don't want to be part of this? I mean, it was obviously a reckless move that will drag the community into these kind of massacres. So what to be blamed here is the state itself, because it has the power, right? And also, I mean, I wouldn't blame a criminal for being criminal. You know, like of course, what the remnant of Assad's regime did was horrible, but I blame the state the way it handled the whole process. It has been doing a lot of things to kind of compensate, to be responsive, to do its best. Like again, Edgar, I've spoken to people in Homs, I've spoken to people in Mesre in Damascus. The same thing I got. It was the security forces that prevented civilians, Sunni civilians, to come to our neighborhood to revenge.
Mm.
You hear this story all the time. You in Latakia. So there is this sense among Alawites also that the security forces, which is HTS, that's how they see it in a way. They call it Lahaya, like Shabab al-Hayya, are really doing their best to control it, but it seems that they are in, unable to, which is true. So that's the dilemma that we are in right now.
Yeah, it seems a significant indicator or like a fact that has been made clear after this is that maybe Ahmed al-Shara and HTS don't have the monopoly on violence that we thought that they did, that they can't actually control the entire country right now. Um, do you know what is happening? As far as you know, have the massacres stopped now, at least temporarily, or are they still ongoing as far as we know?
Um, as we said earlier, we have a lot of misinformation, disinformation. So the army announced finishing its second round of operations in areas. Of course, you sometimes see some Twitter tweets saying that the massacres are still going on. But again, I mean, working in this fields for years now, you know that it could be just one trying to instigate violence or instigate instability.
Mm.
But I mean, as far as I know, now things are calmer, definitely. But the Alawites community is in a state of panic.
Yeah.
That's what we know so far.
Yeah, unsurprisingly,
Mm.
it would be strange if they weren't. So Ahmed al-Shara, I think, has said that that the state will be launching sort of investigations or some kind of committee to look into what has happened.
Mm.
Do
Mm.
you have any faith that this will actually lead to prosecution of people who've committed massacres?
Uh, I hope so. That's what I can say. The issue here is that we don't know. uh, so he created two committees, fact-checking committees and civil peace committee, right? Civil peace committee will work hand in hand with the other one. Basically, they will talk to the affected communities, right? And they will try to understand what happened and how they can redress the grievances. And the issue is that so he appointed three figures, two close to him. Um, um, I mean, close to the factions fighting with him. None of them is HTS, but Ahrar Sham, former leader Hassan Soufan, Anas Ayrut also like close to HTS, and they have Khalid al-Ahmad. Khalid al-Ahmad is from the Alawites community, but Khalid was Bashar's advisor until 2016, 2017, and he was exiled by Bashar at certain point. So there is like really public outcry now by appointing this figure, who many Syrian thinks that he was involved in Assad's killing machine, right? So that's the civil committee, the peacekeeping committee, the peace committee, and then you have the fact-finding committee and a justice committee. I think there is a will. Definitely, there is a will. Um, the question becomes is that if the committee finds that people from the government or from factions, especially Amshad Hamzat, these SNA factions, like leaders, would they put them into justice?
Yeah.
Would this happen? Again, I don't want to say that I don't have hope in it, but I think Ajolani is willing to go like to enormous lengths to stabilize the region. And if this means like this will lead to stabilizing Syria, I think he will go with it.
Okay. Well, hopefully, I think that's the only way forward is to bring people to justice in like a transparent trial and this kind of like juridical process. But we'll have to follow these developments for now. Thank you so much, Orwa Ajjoub, for speaking to us today on Kalam Podcast.
Thank you, Edgar. Thank you for having me.